not a lot of people realize that the only love that's wasted is love withheld. When we aren't willing to give this love because we feel like it won't be reciprocated or won't be even appreciated, we have to realize that now it is a waste. We are withholding this love and kind of holding ourselves back from forming these deeper connections or even giving people a level of love they've never had because of our own implications, our own ideas. And I think when we kind of get this own reasoning that's very pessimistic or negative, this idea that just because we are giving this love, we aren't going to be rewarded with whatever we want or giving, some sort of benefit, we have to realize that love isn't supposed to be a transaction. We shouldn't be providing anything for something in return. That love is genuine. Love is something that is kind of unconditional in the sense. And when we are putting conditions and kind of labels or things that are needed in order to appreciate this love, like credentials or something, it makes it so much harder to actually appreciate it, to actually give that level of love. And I think a lot of people have this idea of withholding it as something that, gives them more power or gives them, more of a feeling, when really it's damaging. Now it's going to be harder to actually have relationships and form these connections because you are withholding of this love. And I think a lot of times withholding of this love makes relationships, for one, very difficult, and it kind of makes you question about love. And I feel like a lot of the things I've talked about on this page and kind of in my own experience have been based around love, because love is truly everywhere. And I think there's a lot of flaws and things that kind of are misguided when it comes to love. And it's important to know that when I'm saying a lot of these things, it's not because I have this huge, perfect moral compass that everything is right or everything's universal that I'm saying. It's that it's my own experience. And I hope that people are able to understand that same experience, especially when we're talking about love and timing. And a lot of people have this idea of right person, wrong time, when really it's just sometimes the wrong person and the right time. And I think that timing is definitely important, and we have to value that when we want to form, better relationships instead of blaming ourselves. Sometimes it's not right person, wrong time. It's just the right time and the wrong person. You were giving that level of love to the person correctly and doing everything you needed in order to build a relationship, but that person simply wasn't enough for you. They weren't able to match that. And I think a lot of times we are giving other people so much credit in relationships where we're the only reason it's working. When you are going out of your way and bending over backwards to help these people, to teach them how to love you correctly, we have to realize that now we are doing everything. That level of effort isn't being reciprocated. And a lot of times people are taking it for granted, time and time again. It gets so much easier to kind of have this discrepancy in love and this unequally yoked, feeling when people aren't able to give that back. People aren't able to understand the level of effort that goes into it. When you are trying to make it the right time and forcing people to be someone they're not, it makes it so much harder to actually appreciate that love. You've already made it the right time. You are already the right person you need to be for them, but that person simply isn't the right person for you. They aren't doing what they need to. They aren't making it and matching that level of energy and effort. And that's why it's harder to get in a relationship. And that connection, that imbalance that we kind of experience, is something that we have to understand. We have to understand how people are treating us and how people are observing us. And I think when we want to build relationships, a lot of times we can kind of make excuses for people that hurt us. And I've made videos on it because it's very important to realize the amount of excuses we are able to create is something that's unfathomable. It is very, interesting to see how well we can do this in order to cope or to kind of feed ourselves delusion that we are okay or that we're not hurt over a certain situation, when really it is damaging to us. And that damage is something that definitely comes with it. And I think we have to realize that when people are telling us, that you deserve better or that they're trying to be better, talking is one thing, but actually doing it, means so much more. And I think you have to realize that when people are saying, what you are deserving, that says a lot. It doesn't matter how much that person thinks you deserve. If they aren't willing to be better for you, if they aren't trying to, it doesn't matter. It's only going to make things harder. It's only going to make building that connection, so much more unrealistic, when you have to realize that these people are saying that, you are deserving of these things, but they're failing to do anything to change, anything to improve. It doesn't matter how well you are able to understand what someone needs in the future. If you can't be that for them or work towards it, it doesn't matter. Instead of listening to their actions and listening to their words, we have to focus on how they are actually treating us. The level of effort. If they are able to understand that trying to be a better person is what they need to be doing in order to make this relationship work. And I think a lot of people are so easy with kind of blinding themselves in these connections and kind of forcing themselves to not see a certain side of things in order to feel better about it, makes it so much harder to actually value the relationships at its core. The things that are important, who you are trying to gain and what you are trying to, benefit from it, means so much more. And this benefit is something that comes not from, necessarily cutting people off, or forming these fake, relationships. It's genuine. It's actually having these relationships, and understanding that these relationships and connections end. We have to realize that connections are never going to be forever in any aspect. Even if things are perfect, death, grief, everything is experienced. And we have to understand that that is real. That's a very real part of life, is that every connection ends, and that's what gives it so much meaning. That's what gives your life meaning. And I think a lot of people have this idea that when they lose something, that they aren't going to be able to gain it back, or that they've lost now a part of themselves, when really, like, we have to realize that losing yourself is sometimes what you need in order to gain something, in order to find something that is a part of your life, in order to improve or become something that you need to be. We have to lose things, you know and I think a lot of people are attaching themselves and trying so hard to keep things in their life that they're kind of damaging themselves. It's just important to realize that in order to find yourself, you have to lose things. You have to lose some connections and lose some people, and realize that it's not always going to be something negative or damaging for you, but sometimes it can open a door. Sometimes rejection is redirection, and it points you in the right way that you need to be. And I think so many people have this idea of attaching themselves to these things, whether it is superficial or these connections, that we have this idea that we can only benefit through other people, and really we are the benefit ourselves. We are able to, be what we want, and to chase after these things. And I think if we put a lot more trust in ourselves, a lot more energy and effort, we have to realize that we are capable without those things. How would we be able to even see some connections, and see some people, and find some things out about ourselves without losing the right people, without losing the right connections, or the right feelings, or the right goals? Instead of attaching yourself to so many things, understand that you could observe it and move on from it. The same way we observe our emotions and are able to understand how we are feeling, this is something that we have to do. It's something that can benefit us so much better. And that allowing things to be lost makes finding relationships and establishing connections so much better. It makes it so much, better, not only for the people in the relationships, but yourself. Your own connection is now, improved because of this. And I think a lot of people have this idea of losing this, or losing that time, when really it makes it so much better to actually, form relationships, to form connections. And I think forming these connections is what truly we need. You need to form these connections, and you need to feel this level of loss. And I think in forming connections means being vulnerable, and people fearing that vulnerability is definitely what makes it so much harder to actually value the very realness in life that we get to experience. And I think so many people have this idea that letting people in makes them, less appealing or less attractive, when really we have to break that cycle of thinking like this. And so many people are stuck on this idea that the more someone sees them, the less that they'll love them, when really you have to be yourself. You have to be able to be accepted by these people. Instead of hiding who you are, or kind of walking on eggshells when communicating how you feel, it's only going to get harder to find people that can actually value you when you keep hiding yourself. The people looking for you can't find you if you keep, staying in this comfort zone. And I think a lot of times the thing that you actually need are outside that zone. When it comes to forming these connections, I feel like so many times people are very quiet and distant when it comes to vulnerability because of this fear. Their own self-perception is something that they are scared other people will see, and other people will kind of pick up on. And we have to realize how we speak about ourselves and how we view ourselves is definitely things that other people will pick up on. We have to value that part of our life, that aspect of how we are able to control and hold ourselves, so much more than how other people are able to retain it. And I think wanting a relationship and wanting connections means having that positive, self-view, that own self-projection that you are offering to other people needs to be a lot more valuable. And I think that value is something that so many people are scared to give. So many people are scared to actually have. And when we want to feel better, when we want to have connection that goes beyond these things, and genuinely makes us feel like we are better people, we have to understand that that part of things is what's most important. We have to want more for ourselves, become more for ourselves, in order to feel like loving people isn't something that, we're going to waste. We're not wasting any energy on loving this person because we have so much love to give. And we have to realize that love is that light. It's not something that can be captured or disdained, or even thrown out or thrown away. No, we are generating it time and time again. And I think so many people have this idea of love being, taken out, or we can't actually give it And that's what makes it hard to experience it. When you are giving that level of love, when you are giving, this level of effort in order to actually feel better, and to make deeper connections and to form deeper bonds, that is when we get to experience it. That is when holding love isn't something that we have to do anymore, because we are realizing that it's literally everywhere. It's something we can give, wherever and whenever we want, because there's no amount of love that we can, hold on to. We are able to have it, create it, and store it. And I think being able to understand that part, to understand that love that we're holding so dear to, or that we have this feeling that, no one should be able to take this from us, as soon as we are able to let go, we're able to receive. And I think a lot of people forget that, if you're holding on to this thing so tightly, how are you able to be given anything else? And this goes with giving, this goes with, offering, and being so much more than what is asked from you in these connections. And if we want to feel better about it, if we want to have, a better idea and understanding of what we want to give to these people, we have to understand that it starts with us. And it starts with the connection that we are able to give to other people.